former President John F. Kennedy once stated, the ignorance of one voter impairs the security of all. As Franklin states, the United States is one of the oldest democracies in history. However, the United States has continuously been having low voter turnout rates in both federal and state elections. Because of this, I believe that voting should be made obligatory for all citizens 18 and over in both state and federal elections. Because we are all citizens of the United States, it's important to know the vitality of voting in both state and federal elections and how much of an impact it has in our country. Making voting obligatory will increase voter turnout rates, increase the political knowledge that we as citizens should have. It will also increase the trust that we have in our federal government and maintain fairness throughout democratic elections. Because voting is a civic duty and a privilege, it's important to analyze how voter turnout rates have been throughout our history. For example, in 2016, only 55.7 people voted out of the population of the United States, and 36.4 people voted in 2014. This is obviously a very low number of our population voting, and mandatory voting will increase these rates. In addition to that, mandatory voting will also increase the trust that we as citizens have in our federal government. With that being said, I'm going to compare the United States and Australia. Australia has recently implemented mandatory voting in their country, and they have seen an increase in voter turnout rates and have also seen there has also been an increase in trust in their federal government, as surveys have demonstrated. However, when citizens of the United States were asked if they trust their federal government, only 24% of them said that they trusted the government, which is also a very low amount, and it's a very saddening amount. Mandatory voting will also make representatives accountable to aim their goals and their policies at all citizens, not just those that vote. So it's a common motive that people that are educated and people that are of higher socioeconomic status are the ones that tend to vote more, rather than minorities or those that do not have access to education and therefore do not know much about voting. However, that's a really wrong way to see things. And as Lewis states in an article that he published, the size of your wallet and your zip code should not matter. So making voting obligatory for all will make sure that people of all socioeconomic backgrounds and all cultures are able to vote and are forced to vote. Mandatory voting will also increase our political awareness as citizens, and as citizens we should always be educating ourselves, and compulsory voting will enable us and foster more of an understanding of our politics in our country, as we have to vote and we will want to educate ourselves on what we're voting for and the policies. And it's important to also remember that we're not only voting for our representatives, but we're also voting for the policies that they're going to implement, and these policies are ultimately what shapes our future. And as my peer-reviewed source, Chapman, who is a writer at Stanford, said that the electorates shouldn't restrict and shouldn't aim at a certain group of people when they are running for office. With that being said, I'm putting emphasis on the fact that representatives should be aiming their policies and their goals on everyone, not just those that are voting, and mandatory voting will allow and encourage representatives to do so. Because voting is such an important right that we all have, and it's a privilege, it's also important to understand the solution, which, like I said, is compulsory voting. So a lot of countries have already implemented these voting laws in their system, such as, like I said, Australia. And people think that compulsory voting is just they're being forced to go fill out a ballot out of their own free will. You could easily turn in an empty ballot, which is not the greatest thing to do, but compulsory voting has to do with fining the citizen. In Australia, it's $20 US, and they have seen an extreme increase in their voter turnout rate. And according to Ryder Stephanopoulos, between 1945 and 2015, turnout has hovered 85% in those countries that have implemented mandatory voting in their voting system, but have fallen from 75 to 65% in those countries such as the United States that do not mandate voting. Now, to visualize a world with and without mandatory voting. So with mandatory voting, like I said, the voter turnout rates would increase tremendously. They would increase the political knowledge that we as citizens should have and should seek. And it will also promote fairness in elections and increase the trust that we have in our federal government. And like I said, and like publisher Khalid states, that voting not only has to do with the representatives that we're voting for, but it has to do with the policies that they're gonna implement and ultimately shape the way that we live out our lives with these policies that they implement. In conclusion, I am a firm believer that voting should be obligatory for all citizens ages 18 and over. And like former President Barack Obama once stated, that if there was more of a increase in people going out to vote, it would completely change and skyrocket our political map. Thank you. And any questions?
Yes, I have a question. You mentioned Australia as being one of the countries that was successful in making obligatory or obligatory voting policy. Is there any other country that's done it and been successful?
Yes. So I forgot to state it before, but if you look at slide 3 of the PowerPoint, the United States is one of the lowest, like I said, and right next to Australia is Belgium. Belgium is a country that has implemented obligatory voting and has also been very successful with their voter turnout rates. And obviously the fine is in effect, although it's only $20, people prefer to, spend their one day of the year going to go vote instead of having to pay $20 and going through the trouble of paying a fine. So it's been very effective in other countries, such as Belgium, Australia, and I'm pretty sure Sweden is one of them as well.
Thank you. That's been very informative.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much for watching and listening.